welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit with me, Marianne Dursh, your host. As you know, I help nonprofit leaders master the art of influence so they can ask for and receive all they want, need, and deserve without feeling those icky feelings of ineffective, rejected, or pushy. I'm all about the mindset, and I am also about strategy and the marriage of that. So I'm happy to have Mitch Stein here with me today from Chariot, because I think you're the same as me. And we're going to talk about donor advised funds and also about innovation and making big changes in our sector. So hi, Mitch. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Marianne, and
All right.
appreciate the kind intro.
You bet. Okay. So we have, of course, like more formal bios here, but you know how I roll. So Mitch, before I get into this, all of this, I always start with this question, and then that leads into other things. So tell me something you're super proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for folks that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, they'll know that I went out on a limb and started a new company about 4 years ago called Pond, which was a marketplace for nonprofits to get connected to the best tools and services for their organization. And we worked really hard on that for 3 years. And so I'd say I don't get to brag about it often because the end of the story was we ended up deciding to close it down and didn't quite see the liftoff that we wanted to and were hoping for. But I'm still proud and kind of want to brag, especially about the team and what we worked on and how many people we helped. So I think it's usually in the setting of like, yeah, that didn't work out. But at the same time, it's something I'm proud of, that we put a good foot forward. And I feel like it hopefully pushed the conversation amongst folks in the nonprofit sector forward to really engage more and think more about how to be on the cutting edge responsibly and effectively, and driving more innovation.
Yes. And which is something that I feel like we are not very much on the leading edge of innovation. And sometimes in the sector, I'm just saying in general, overall, in my experience.
Yeah.
And also, I really appreciate that you saying that, because sometimes I think, oh, that closed. Should I talk about? You know what? You can be proud of anything you want to. Like, I think sometimes in our culture we're like, oh, but did that work? I don't know. I mean, my husband worked at a biotech startup for 5 years, and it turns out that the technology that they were trying to develop, they got very, very close, but it really wasn't what they wanted. And they were like, but hey, we know. You don't know it till you try it.
Yeah, and it's something that I like to share, particularly with nonprofit audiences, because I think it's something, there's a similar level of like fear of failure,
Yes.
From trying new programs or, trying to do something innovative in small and big ways, where if you don't think you could ever talk about it, if it didn't work out, then you're never going to take those bold steps. And I just think we need more bold action. And hopefully if I help someone get more comfortable with that from sharing my story, then that's great.
Right. Me too. I totally agree. All right. So after that, then now you're at Chariot, and you are the head of strategy for Chariot, a donor advised fund solution for nonprofits to solicit, maximize, and steward DAF donors, donor advised fund donors, and their gifts. So tell me about this work and why it's important to you.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, after we made the decision to close down Pond, I took a little time off, and then I started consulting for a number of different startups in our sector that were providing a variety of solutions for nonprofits. But one of those clients was Chariot, that I worked with for several months and got to know them very well, and then was excited to come on full time and decided that's where I wanted to focus my energy and effort next, because I had gotten more and more familiar with this massive challenge and issue in the nonprofit sector, which is that there's $230 billion sitting in these vehicles called donor advised funds. That means money that has already been set aside for charity. The only way it can be used is for charity. That's the only way that it can leave a fund. And yet this money is sitting there, not yet helping an actual operating nonprofit organization. And why is more of it not moving there? Well, a giant challenge is the fact that donor advised funds are not very usable or user friendly. So for any nonprofit listening to this, I'm sure you've received checks in the mail that just say like from Fidelity Charitable or Vanguard or Schwab. All these major institutions host donor advised funds. And historically, it's been a really broken connection between nonprofits and those DAFs, DAFs, we'll call them for short here in the conversation. And it's because donors can't actually use them in all those typical instances where you would support a nonprofit, not on their website, not on a donation form, not in an event. I have to go log into my bank account and basically like initiate a wire transfer. And then those funds are sent via a check in the mail. So it's this really backward old process. What Chariot built is a payment option. No matter what donor advised fund you use, you can log in directly within a nonprofit's website or donation form and complete your grant in 3 clicks, and it takes about 15 seconds. So you're now creating this avenue for donors with $230 billion sitting there waiting to be donated to a nonprofit to now empower organizations to actually bring that experience and bring those funds into their own fundraising settings and all their pages and sites and campaigns. Wherever they're fundraising and receiving funds digitally, they should be able to receive donor advised fund grants. And it's just been amazing to see that start to be unlocked for all the organizations that we're working with.
$230 billion would solve a lot of problems in our world right now. Okay. So once I got over the shock of that number, so this is something that the nonprofit then would put on their website as a part of how they're already electronic, because everyone's receiving donations electronically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying is you can't do that with a donor advised fund. You have to go like ask, like do this wire transfer, and then somebody has to mail you a check.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you basic, and I hope I'm using this language right.
Yeah,
because I'm going to dumb it down for everyone. Okay. Because if I understand, then everyone will understand. Did you ever do in marketing? Like, what do they call it? Like your Aunt Rose,
yeah.
like that one person so if I can get the technology, anyone can. All right. So then now it's on my website and so now a donor with a donor advised fund can just go to my website and then do and transfer that money.
Yeah, they're able to log into their account, select the amount they want to give, and send the grant directly on your website. They don't leave or go anywhere else. It's just like they were using PayPal or Apple Pay, but It's just funds that they've already set aside. And there's several things that are really powerful about that. Number one is just the fact that a donor is now seeing this experience is built to favor the nonprofit beneficiary. And what I mean by that is we are doing everything we can to make sure that donor is giving the biggest gift possible. Now, DAF donors already are much more generous than your average donor. Their average gift size is about 24 times as large as the average credit card donation. So we're talking an average $5,000 gift from a donor advised fund. But through the Chariot app, they're also actually seeing their full account balance. And what that does is reminds people about all the money that's already sitting there waiting to be donated. And it's just like if you had a gift card, right? If you had a $100 gift card, you'd be looking to buy something around $100. If you had a $500 gift card, it totally changes your frame. And so we see people, once they are looking at their balance on this screen, they then actually increase the size of gift that they were planning on giving, because they're like, wait, we already put $20,000 into this fund. I could give $1,000 in this instance. And it just becomes so easy for them. We also make a suggested donation amount based off of that account balance and our own internal algorithm. So we're not showing the same suggestion to someone with $1,000 in their DAF as $100,000 in their DAF. All this is just to say it's we are obsessive about what are the psychological elements of this process and these small tweaks that increase gift size. And someone going through their donor advised fund platform would never see any of that. It's like an incredibly onerous process. And none of those money managers are trying to think like, how can I help someone take more money out of their account? Whereas that's our entire reason we exist.
So how did the company get started?
Yeah, it's an awesome story. So there were 3 co-founders that were friends from college, and when they graduated and got their first jobs, they all decided we want to make a commitment to donate 10% of our income to charity and get started with that habit right away. And these people that came together and agreed on it were faced with the challenge right away, like, oh, that's actually kind of hard to keep up with. I'm like, how do I hold myself accountable? What can I do to actually keep track of these gifts and how much I'm giving? And someone suggested a donor advised fund, which, might be a question that a lot of people that started listening to this, that might have been their first question is, what is a donor advised fund? It's not a household concept or term. There are over 3 million people now that use donor advised funds, but that number has gone up like 500% in the last 7 years. So it's been growing like wildfire, but there still are a lot of people who aren't familiar. But when they found out about it, they were like, that's great for this commitment we made. And we want our group of friends to leverage this. And then that's when they came across the problem of, okay, we've all started using donor advised funds, but they're not that usable. I can't actually use it when I want to support my friend's marathon he's running. I can't use it on my favorite nonprofit's website. It's a really convoluted process. Why can't I just use this like I would a gift card? And so that was really
or a bank account, right? Or a bank account where you have money, like say it's basically like a bank account where you have money set aside. Here, this is the account that I'm going to use for my philanthropy and my charitable efforts. And I want to be able to use it just like that. Like I'm just transferring money, right, from one account to another.
Yeah, I think the best comparison that it makes it clear to them is like a 401k or an HSA. So 401k is for your retirement account and an HSA is for your health expenses.
Right.
And you can invest the money in those accounts while it's sitting there, but it can only be used for certain purposes. But even like an HSA, you get a credit card, right? You're a debit card that's linked to that account that you can then use in any place you would spend. You don't have that with a DAF, with charitable savings account.
So imagine it would be as easy as using a credit card. All right, this made me think of this because I'm like in this, this is my first year doing this, but I'm in a confidence pool. So for the NFL, so you pick the games and then you have to rank them, how confident you are in your pick, like 16-1. I've never done this before, but my friend did it. I'm like, this seems really fun. And the people who run this, they've been doing it for like 20 years. I've been in this league for forever. I said, okay, I'll try it. And it cracks me up because a couple weeks ago, I won, right? There's like 65 people who play. I won. And she called me and she's like, hey, you won. And she goes, so what's the address to send the check? And I started laughing because I was like, oh, exactly. But she hand wrote me a check, put it in the mail with the stamp and sent it to me. And I'm thinking, when is the last time even most of the clients that I work with, they pay through transfer. Some pay fewer, but they're like, oh, old. They're like, oh, we're old school. We pay through check. Like, okay, whatever. But it just cracked me up. Like, that's just not how the world works anymore, right? The world works on this sort of instant, like, hey, we all go to dinner and Mitch and I are like, oh, here, let me Venmo you. It's the instant. So basically you're putting all of this charitable money, easy access, right?
Yeah.
That people can.
Yeah. It's so funny that you bring up that check story, because this is something we hear from nonprofits literally every day. And I will get on calls where someone will like bring out a physical stack of checks and like hold them up into the camera and be like, we just got all of these DAF gifts today. And because every DAF is sending a different check with different information, it's coming in the mail weeks after the donation has been made. So like the data is bad, the timing is bad. They often don't have the actual name of the donor. They rarely have an email. You're lucky if you get a mailing address. And so it's like a nightmare to reconcile the physical processing. It's all terrible. And like you said, it feels like, why are we doing this in 2023?
Yeah. And it's like, I'm going to hold space for two things to be true. One is, gratitude for the money and the gifts in any form. And also, how can we make this, easier for everyone? And, and just help to just tapping into the resources that this money is already there.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't have to go find it. It's there. It just encouraging people to making it easier for people to access.
Yeah, I think there's two things that you raised there, which are really valuable. One is, you're grateful for any money that's coming in the door. Like that's awesome. But receiving a check and having no idea where or when it was donated or by who, you're missing out on so much value. And that is one of the big innovations of doing this through your own system is you capture that donor name and email immediately. And so you're not hunting down, trying to figure out who this check came from. You can thank them appropriately right away and steward them like accordingly, which most staff donors are typically pretty large donors.
Right.
The average account balance in a donor advised fund is over $100,000.
Right. Like without having to be like an FBI agent and try to.
Yes. And then so that's the first part is just like stewarding them. And then the second part is just the process improvement. Whenever a DAF grant is made through Chariot, you receive those funds electronically from Chariot. So we actually process the gift for you so that you're not getting a check in the mail. So the data is entering your system consistently and the money is entering your system consistently without any like manual processes, which are prone to risk and error and loss and all these challenges that everyone's familiar with.
That's very, very cool. And it just feels like, because one of the things that we work on and I work on with my clients is, the idea of abundance. And in our world, we, in the nonprofit space, we were sold. And I believed this too, like, because I would say this, I've said this, because I believed it was true at the time. There's only so much money for philanthropy. And we're going to help you get that bigger slice of the pie. And what I realized is that is not true. Because the universe is limitless and there's enough for everyone. And then when I hear things like that, it reminds me that there is enough there's money all around you. It's just a matter of accessing it. And because I just believe that the resources are all around us. And so what I love about this, speaking of this in more of like a, in a higher level sense of I'm just taking what's already there and helping it become more useful and more accessible, which is amazing and completely, I just, validating that there are resources. There's no lack of resources. What lacks is the connection to the resources. And that's what you're doing. And that's why I think this is super interesting.
Yeah. And I love that you are, and I know that aligns with your messaging overall, is that like people should be empowered to ask for the money that's out there and not feel bad about it or fearful. And I think there's two super common characteristics, or I would say like personas of someone who has a donor advised fund. Mind you, there's over 3 million people using them, so it's not a monolith. But in general, you have people that are either really intentional with their philanthropy. So they're like similar to the founders of Chariot that started using a DAF, right? They had a specific goal. They wanted to stay accountable to it. This is a really tax efficient and easy way for me to manage philanthropy. And that's someone where if you bring up donor advised funds, either I say bring it up. I mean, that could exist on an email or a web page that they encounter for them to utilize. You're making things easier for them and kind of reinforcing their goal of being like intentional and improving the ease of their philanthropy, giving them an easier way to donate. which is great. But there's also a whole nother persona of people who are like, their financial advisor told them like, this would be a great way to save on taxes this year, make a bigger contribution to your donor advised fund. And they might have like forgotten how much money is in their tab, or like they don't use it every day. And so by bringing it up or presenting people that option, people are honestly like reminded, oh, wow, yeah, I do have a lot of money sitting in there. And it's like, for those of us that aren't millionaires, it's hard to like put ourselves in that situation where you could have forgotten that you had that much money sitting to the side. But it's
Wow.
true, it really does happen. So both of those instances are not anything you need to be worried about someone's response to. You are helping them. You're helping them use this tool that they opted in to use because it was better for their philanthropy. So like run at that, engage with it. It's not something to be afraid of.
Awesome. This is amazing. Okay, I want to switch a little bit, okay?
Sure.
If that's all right. Because I want to talk about, because this is not your only experience with charity, because you are a board member, right, of an organization. And I would just love to hear, from this is one of the other big, I think, gaps we have, that I work with people to sort of build stronger relationship is with a board member. So I love when I have people come on and just, I would love for you to share a little bit about, who you serve and what makes you connected to this organization, and, you know, what you see as being a board member, as a leader of an organization. Like what makes that successful for you?
Yeah, of course. Happy to. So I'm on the board of the LGBT Center here in New York City, where I'm based. I've been on the board for almost 5 years. And I got involved with the organization because I joined a charity bike ride. So the Northeast AIDS Ride runs from Boston to New York every year and benefits the HIV and AIDS programming at the center. My dad and I actually joined that together because we lost my uncle to AIDS in the 90s. And so we did that ride for several years, which brought me closer to the organization, was doing a ton of fundraising for them. And then, took the next step to actually join the board and be part of their, their governance and leadership, which has been, really was at the crux of my own movement into being day-to-day involved with nonprofits as my full-time job. I used to be an investment banker in a former life. And I wanted my everyday to be about supporting nonprofit work because of that experience. So it is deeply, deeply meaningful for me today and in my own like journey so far in life. And so I guess I give all that context to say, remember that how meaningful this can be for your board members. And that don't be afraid to like ask them for things and engage with them, because that's one area. And I've also engaged with tons of other organizations, managing boards, and friends and colleagues that are on other boards. And I would say that's the one of the bigger complaint areas of people feeling underutilized. So, take advantage of your board, recognize and ask, like, what are the types of things you want to do? What do you feel like you're good at? And what do you want to contribute to the organization? And some people that might just be like, I'm good at writing you big checks. And then the answer
Right.
could be great. Great, we'll take those. But a lot of people will say like, oh, I would really love to be involved with a certain type of programming we do, or I'm really passionate about volunteering. I'd love to get more of the board involved in volunteering. And in doing that and better meeting like their needs and leveraging their skills, you're then harnessing something really valuable for your organization. That's really important. But you're also really through that better engagement of these people, you're going to get them more, even like a better fundraiser. They're probably going to contribute more to your organization financially because they feel personally more invested with their time and how they're sharing their talents with the organization. So I think that's a area that I have seen some organizations do really well and some not do so well. And it can result in board members feeling a little bit more, I don't know, just not as invested. Like, do they really do they value me? Like, do they just want me here because I buy a table at the gala every year?
Right.
And so
I can write a big check, like if that's the, but as I coach and train people to have more influential relationships, and the basic premise of influence is when I'm of value to you, you'll be of value to me. So I don't really need to worry about how you're going to serve me. All I have to worry about is how can I serve you? And that's when I found like, and that's really what you were saying is they were tapping into, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? And by doing that, it ignited something in you. And now you're like, okay, how can I help? What can I do? Because ideally, it comes from, the energy of choice. Like, I don't have to do it. I get to do it. I choose to do it. Right. I'm
Mhm.
excited to do it. And when you're like, and I do feel like people hesitate, oh, I don't want to ask them. They're so busy. Okay, well, what's the resistance? And that resistance is, I feel like that the resistance coming from, they already feel like they're not really meeting the needs of their board members. So they're afraid to ask them for anything else. When you meet
Mhm.
somebody's needs, as evidenced by what you were saying, you don't even have to ask. They're going to be coming to you. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, what can I do? How can I help? What's going on? And
Yeah.
that when I work with boards, that's what I see. You know what I'm saying? Like the ones that they're the good ones are the ones that are. I did an event with my husband on Saturday. I kind of voluntold him to. My husband makes hard candy. It's his hobby. And one of my clients is having an event. I'm like, come make hard candy. And like, there's like 3 or 4 board members there. They didn't have to be there. Right. They just
Mhm.
said, but they chose to spend their Saturday afternoon, and nobody and they weren't feeling put upon to be there. They wanted to be there. They wanted to interact with the kids. They wanted to experience this. And wasn't everyone? No, but it was a lot, and that's what I think, like, that's why I wanted to ask you about your experience, because, you know, when when somebody cares enough to say, what would you like to contribute? What would make this a great experience for you? And then they deliver that, that's it. You're in. It's all good, you know?
Yeah, and I've seen the resistance from a lot of nonprofit leaders is that they don't want a board member to suggest like, well, I've been thinking we should open up another building in this other neighborhood, or whatever. Fill in the blank with your like extraneous suggestion
Yeah,
or
yeah, 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 yeah.
activity that is like mission creep or like not in the part of the program, whatever. And so I think there's also a really smart way to ask the questions of your board members where you're not just leaving it open ended, where they so asking something like, what are like skills that you think you bring to the board? Like, what are the types of activities that you want to engage in? Like, get specific for them to list some examples. And then you can assign them where, because it's your job to be leading and setting the strategy and leading the organization. So you should know, like, great, we've been wanting to build out our volunteer program and we've needed someone to take charge of that. And like, here's 2 board members that have listed that as a high priority. Let's empower them to do something with it. As opposed to like, oh shoot, then now they want us to be doing volunteering stuff. We got to come up with a volunteer program. Like there's
Right.
a really important difference there.
Yes, and also if this happens all the time, it's not just like they go to a benefit like, oh, we should be doing this, and so that's why people work with me, because I teach them how to make those things go away
Yes.
in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're going away. Like how you redirect that energy,
Mm,
and connect with them, because sometimes people just throw stuff out there, and they're not really expecting you to do anything with it. They're
yeah.
just they're just they're just like, this is really cool. Yeah, okay. It, and so like everything, there's a balance,
Hmm.
and I think the bottom line is, I wanted to ask you about your experience as a board member. So to tap into that, I felt valued for who I was and what I brought to the table.
Hmm.
No. And how long have you been on the board?
Oh, 4.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is there like term, like 3 years or?
Yeah, it's 2-year terms, and I think the max is 8 or 10 years. I forget how long it is, but yeah, hopefully still a ways to go. And we actually just our executive director that's been with the organization for 13 years is retiring at the end of this year. So it's a really critical time for the board and bringing in a new leader that'll start at the beginning of next year. And so now there's a lot of added responsibility of making sure that new leader is set up for success. And that we're all there offering these skills and experiences. It's a super timely and relevant discussion.
Amazing. All right. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share about donor advised funds, innovation in nonprofit, anything I didn't cover you'd love to share?
Yeah, I think on the donor advised fund front specifically, I just think it's a scary, intimidating topic for most people at nonprofits. They're not super familiar with it, or it sounds like that's a financial management topic. I'm not a finance person. And so I would just encourage people, if you're having some of those thoughts or reservations or thinking like, what the heck is a donor advised fund? Just the first step here to getting more donor advised fundraising is just to learn a bit more about it. And we have tons of resources on the Chariot blog that are like simple 101 walkthroughs. What is a DAF? How do I get more DAF fundraising? What are DAF donors? What are the stats in the industry? I just think getting yourself familiar with some of those statistics and information will make you way more confident to bring that up in a conversation with a donor. And it could be a huge unlock and where they give their gift from, just because you're bringing it up and talking about it. So just getting comfortable, encouraging your teams to get comfortable, sharing those resources are huge. And that would be my big takeaway. If you got nothing else from this conversation, just let's start learning about it, because it's just becoming more and more common, particularly for larger donors to be using that vehicle. And when it comes to nonprofit innovation, I think one of the most difficult things that I heard from people that would use Pond in our platform when I was running this marketplace between nonprofits and the vendors that they would work with is I had a lot of nonprofit staff using the tool and coming to us and getting excited about, I saw this problem in my organization and I really want to help solve it. So I went out of my way to come use Pond, discover some good options, do my research, talk with vetted and diligence providers. And then they'd sort of get stonewalled internally. And it would be this big like letdown for them when all they were trying to do was help. So I would just encourage anyone, especially in a leadership position in a nonprofit, is figure out how you can create some space for exploration and creativity and innovation, where you're fielding ideas, you're giving people some space and encouraging them to explore, whether that's like they get to go to a conference and connect with peers and learn about new things. It just, those little things can go such a long way. And in the reverse direction, people feeling like they're not heard when they're putting extra effort into something they're excited about is like the worst thing you can do for employee satisfaction and retention. And I feel like 100% of those people where I saw that happen left their organization within a year.
Yes.
So it's really, really critical.
You have just said, this is exactly why I do what I do, because that is why I work with people and what I work with them on, how to get your ideas across, how to enroll people in a vision, how to implement long-term change. That's why I started, my business moved, because that's where I saw people wanted to create change, but then they tried and there was a lot of pushback. And then there was people get discouraged and they leave. Like, I'll go to someplace, so how can you help people feel seen and heard? And from the other side of the person with the idea, how can I enroll somebody in a vision? How can I get them to do what I want them to do from it, the energy of choice? And so thank you for illustrating that, because I didn't tell you to say that.
She didn't. I promise. We didn't. This wasn't in the show notes. It wasn't in the show notes.
Now, Mitch, if you want to come on my podcast, that is truly it. How do I enroll people in the vision for what I want? And I get excited about an idea, and then it goes, wah, because they just don't understand how to do that. And then there's a lot of feelings to unpack on the other side of that, or for a lot of people. And it can be very disheartening. And you feel like, you're coming up against the wall all the time. And on the other side of that, it says people they want change, but they fear it. And so how can you help people, like I said, enroll people in a vision and help people move through that? And so that's why I started moving my business more and more towards that, because that's what I felt was really keep staying in the way of progress, not the lack of ideas or strategies, but helping people enroll others in a vision and ushering them through that change, right? And elevating their leadership to be able to navigate that, to be like, hey, maybe it didn't click the first time, but maybe, okay, because sometimes when you get that rejection, you don't know how to
Shut
handle
down.
it, and you take it really personally when it really wasn't about you.
Mhm.
It never really is, anyway.
And it's the
Well,
same skill set in fundraising, by the way, which
it
I'm
is.
sure
It's
you
exactly
know.
right, which is
Yeah.
why it's really just enrolling people in a vision,
Mm.
and and getting people to do what you want them to do, or buy into an idea or a vision, and to choose that for themselves instead of feel like I have to do it, or from a board perspective, donor perspective, any perspective, it's the energy of choice that it's like, because the more this is the paradox of this, the more you give somebody the ability to choose, the more likely they're going to choose what you want.
Mm.
And
And
so there's a whole nother thing about that, but but
what
everybody knows all that already.
one really quick thing on that front, this like the choice, power of choice, and also the weight of choice. Just keep in mind when you're fundraising and when someone's making a donation decision, it's actually two decisions. So they're making a budgeting decision from their own finances, and then they're making an allocation decision. Where do I want that to go, and which nonprofits, quote unquote, deserve that money? And that's a unique thing about the donor advised fund fundraising setting, is they've already budgeted. So you're not fighting that battle. You're exclusively talking about allocation. And so it's a pretty different mindset. And you've made the like weight of choice much lighter. They've already made the hard decision. Now it's kind of like the
Right,
fun
they've
and
already set the
exciting.
money aside.
Yeah.
They
Now
can't
it's
do
like the
anything
fun
else with
part.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the fun part. Where do I allocate this and get them to buy into your vision? Because they've got like money sitting waiting to do that. So I just wanted
Wow.
to bring it
Woo.
home with that.
All right. Last question. This is how I end this show, which is when I'm in New York City, obviously we're gonna go to karaoke. What's your go-to song?
Oh man. Ugh. I have so many. I feel like any Whitney Houston song. I think I will always love you is
That's
like
amazing. That's ambitious. Can you sing?
no, but it's as someone who can't sing, it's important to pick a song that everyone can't help but also chime in on, so that it kind of drowns out my
I
voice.
agree with that as well. Like, if you gotta pick a song everybody knows and they'll just sing along, and it's like singing around a piano.
Yeah, exactly. And like, who can't sing along to I Will Always Love You? So
The drunker the better. The better you sound. All right, Mitch, thanks so much for being here and sharing. And you mentioned there's a lot of resources on your website, just learning about donor advised funds in general overall, and then also what you all do, and how can people access that?
yeah, so our website is givechariot.com. And definitely look me up on LinkedIn, Mitch Stein. I share a ton of resources, stories, insights, what have you.
Which is how we met. I saw something that you posted and I'm like, hey, come talk about this on my show.
Exactly. So I share a ton there. So definitely let's connect there. And otherwise, the website has great tutorials both on DAFs as a category of fundraising, as well as specifically how Chariot helps you raise more of them. So
sounds great. Hey, thank you again, Mitch, for being here. And thank you, everyone. And if you are interested, all those links are in the show notes that Mitch just mentioned. I have those all in the show notes, so you can go and check the website and connect with him on LinkedIn. You are very active there. It's very cool. And LinkedIn has really come a long way, hasn't it? I'm really, I used to like just a lot of resistance to it, but I have to say I'm enjoying my time. I said, if I'm doing LinkedIn, I'm doing it my way.
I could talk
that's what I do.
We could have a whole nother podcast episode about how much I love LinkedIn. I don't like use any social media other than LinkedIn. I think it's so powerful. To me, it's the one social media platform that's meant to connect with new people.
Yeah.
And really connect. Like we're on a podcast together. I've had multiple meetings or attended things with people. Like I honestly feel like it's in the thousands of people that I've met and connected with and genuinely worked with by being active there. So that's awesome. I'll plug that
there
company.
You go. That's
I don't
some
work for them,
inspiration.
but
And if you are interested in talking with me about this, all the, growing your influence and your leadership and easily enrolling people in a vision and getting those ideas implemented that you've always wanted to get implemented, there is also a link to book a call with me, quickie intro call. You know me. Well, let's just talk and see if I can help. And if, I can for sure help. And if we can talk about what it's like to work with me or not, that's okay. I just love to really connect with people. So thanks again, Mitch.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Okay.